Right, so today we're shooting a Rolex watch, which we had already shot a few weeks back, but it turns out that some of the images we're not 100% happy with, and you know, the whole thing about this job is to try and always get the best photos we can, and if we don't, well, we just redo it so that we learn something new, and yeah, it's quite satisfying when we achieve really the result that we're looking for. So we're shooting this beautiful Rolex Oyster Perpetual, which is a real stunner. And we're going to do it in a very accessible way, so that any of you who want to shoot watches at home, you know, can see that we're not using some very fancy setup. It's the main thing with photography, is to try and find solutions without having to splash on expensive gear if you can avoid it. So you've got to make sure that your watch is as clean as possible, dust-free, so that you don't have later on to remove dust specks in Photoshop. So we just make sure with a microfiber cloth and wearing gloves that we handle the watch as little as possible and with clean hands, and that should do the trick. We'll do a different set of different types of photos. Some photos in the box, some on the box, some of the watch alone, not necessarily with the box at all. We also like to include the warranty card, which is something that people who collect watches or invest in watches like to see. One thing I find very useful are C-clips for watches. They allow you to stand, they're like stands for watches. They allow you to display the watch in a way that, well, just shows the watch and nothing else really. And I'm going to cover that base to make it look like the watch is actually floating above the texture that I'm choosing. In this case, it's leather. Leather is a nice base because it just contrasts with the watch. The watch is metallic, is hard, it's shiny, and the leather is a lot more organic, matte, and yeah, a nice contrast. Important thing as well is to have the camera on a tripod. That way you don't have to worry about camera shake. The closer you get to an object when you take a photo, the more likely you are to experience camera shake. So here we are. We've set up the watch on the C-clip that I was talking about before, and I've surrounded the base with leather. And that just means that when I focus with the camera on the watch face, the background will be blurred anyway, so we won't see too much of it, but there'll be a bit of that texture. So I'm going to do a test shot and see how that looks. What I like to do is to set my camera on a timer, 2 or 5 seconds. That way, if I press the shutter, it doesn't make the camera vibrate. I press the shutter, it stabilizes and then takes the photo. That way you don't have any camera shake or blur in your photos. So let's give it a go. We do a test shot. We'll review the shot now. And in this instance, there's still too much glare. And the way to change the glare is to change the orientation of the watch or to change the orientation of the light. So we'll reshoot that image just to make sure that we don't have any glare. I've moved the watch a little bit so that the way the light hits the watch doesn't cause the reflection that the dreaded reflection that we're trying to avoid. And I review the image, and that's a much better image. This time we don't have the reflection, and that's what we're trying to aim for. I'm just going to repeat that so that we have a good selection of images that we can be happy with and display. So a lot of you might be wondering how you can at home recreate, you know, up your game in terms of watch photography. It's very easy at home. You know, you don't have to look for an expensive setup, as I explained before. My best advice would be to look for a window. If you can position your watch by a window under natural light, you should be able to get some really decent lighting. Another way to do it is if you bounce. So imagine you have the light coming from this side, from the window. It might cast a bit too much of a harsh shadow. What you can do is bounce the light with a piece of maybe polystyrene you've got lying around. You put the piece of polystyrene or anything white like this on the other side, the light will literally bounce on it and come back this way. So you've got light literally coming from both sides. So I'll give you a better lighting. And as I said, try and get yourself some C-clips. They're available, they're very cheap online. If you don't have those, you can always use a champagne cork. And I know it seems really, really amateur, but even the pros do that. You can sit the watch on a champagne cork like this, and it sits usually quite well. And you can take photos where your background, basically what's below, is going to be blurred, and your watch will really stand out. And finally, you see we've used some textures, some background textures that are contrasting with the watch. You can recreate this at home by using household items, some blankets that you have, some fabric, some old clothes or something. It works with really lots of things. Even gravel that you get from outside, the contrast of the rock, the organic matter, will really contrast well with the watch. Just be careful that you don't scratch the watch, because that would be really quite annoying. But yeah, so that's our simple trick for watch photography. Keep watching our videos, because we'll keep trying to develop a little bit what we explained, and maybe get a little bit more in depth and more professional and more. Yeah, hope you enjoyed.